when I was thinking about this, I think, how did we end up in missions? And I need to blame it on the songs we used to sing. So the songs we sang actually influenced us more than we realized at the time. So I'd like to sing a song that would give you an impression of what sort of things we were singing into our lives. So we thought it would be good to give you an overview of what we're doing. There's a video, the Hands on Houses video. Is it possible for us to show the video now?
All you have to do is look around here to see just the thousands and thousands of people who need all these different needs.
You say, well, what is it that I've got to offer? You know, the building houses was what I felt I could do. My stated goal was 1 million houses in India. And, you know, you could say, well, that's crazy, or you could say, well, that's too small. We want to build houses for as many people as we can. The person has to be either a widow, or physically handicapped, or in an extreme case, like unable to look after themselves.
The communities that we're working here in South India, those people are traditionally pushed to the very edges of the community and denied a lot of opportunities that other people have. It's not through any fault of their own.
They have a ceremony when a girl becomes a widow, and they actually rip off her marriage necklace and break her bangles and so that they take everything away from them, so they really degrade them.
And there's a lot of stigma around widows and families reject them and sometimes might blame them for the deaths of their husbands.
Second வந்து உலகத்தரமான சேஃப்டி தான். யாரும் அவங்க கொடுத்து சப்போர்ட் பண்ணுற மாதிரி இல்லை. அதனால் விடோஸ்க்கு வந்து எந்த விதமான வழியுமே இல்லை.
A friend of mine once said, you can drive through a village and you can spot a widow's house. It's usually the one that looks like it's about to fall to pieces. Every house we replace is built out of palm branches, and it may have no walls, it may have walls that are about 2 feet high, that cut palm logs into strips of wood that don't last.
Every 2 years அது மாற்றிட்டே இருக்கணும். அப்போது வந்து ரொம்ப பரவாயில்ல. இப்போல்லாம் வந்து ஷெட்டு மாற்றணும்னா 10,000. அதனால் அது அவங்களால அந்த 10,000ன்றது அவங்களுக்கு ரொம்ப ரொம்ப கஷ்டம். சான்ஸே இல்லை. அதனால் மாற்றாமலே அப்படியே வச்சுட்டு ரெண்டாவது இது இன்செக்ட்ஸ் இந்த தேடு பாம்பு நல்ல
அப்போ மழை கஷ்டமாக தான் படுத்துது. நமக்கு இப்போ தான் நல்லா
how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to do that. Engineers are problem solvers, and so I love a problem. If you give me a problem, I want to solve it. These are the panels that we use for roofing, for the ceilings of the houses. So these are the made ready for the ceiling. You get a house free of charge, absolutely no strings attached. We don't expect anything from you, but we want you to know that somebody loves you, and this is an expression of that.
இப்போ என்ன பார்க்குறாங்கன்னா இந்த அளவுக்கு வாழ விட்டுருந்தது இதுமாரி வெள்ளக்காரங்க கொடுத்து லட்சமாக டீசெண்டாக இருந்து போகணும் அப்படின்ற போராட்டம்.
We want to show people their value, and when you see that on their faces, then it's great.
I think when you look at what people need in life, shelter, food, community, love, I think a house is tangible evidence of that. It's so concrete and embodies all those things.
A house is an incredible tool to build a home and a family.
இந்த வீடு நல்லா நல்லா இதை பற்றி நமக்கு என்ன பண்ணுறாங்க தோணுன்னா நம்ம மீண்டும் எப்படி என்ன பண்ண போகிறோம் அப்படின்றாங்க எங்கள் வாழ்க்கை.
What about sitting in the villages and thinking, what am I doing here? This is crazy. There are mosquitoes around. I could get malaria. There are all sorts of diseases. It's hot. It's stinky. What am I doing here? And I just suddenly had this epiphany, that not many other people have this opportunity. That in actual fact, it's a great privilege.
I think it's hope as opposed to hopelessness. Hope for something better to happen in their lives. And so I think when you see a seed of hope planted in the lives of our community, there's hope for improvement, hope for things to get better. The God gives us that hope. And so, Don and I have felt that over the years, that is a gift that we want to be able to carry and to give to everyone whose path we cross. A gift of hope that comes from above, comes from our Heavenly Father. And over the years, as Don said, we have sung songs like that song that Don sang for you. The words come from Isaiah. Here I am, Lord, send me. And when we sing things like that, do we really know what we're singing into our lives? As a family, we wear a ring. It's our family ring. We designed it. It has a picture of a Scottish thistle on the ring, because we both have heritage from Scotland. And then it has our family motto, which we also chose. We didn't like the ones we could inherit. They were meaningless. So we went to the Bible. And in 2 Corinthians, there is a scripture that we translated into Latin, because traditionally the signet ring has a motto in that ancient language, Latin. It says, Amore Dei Coggo, for I am compelled by the love of God. And that is our family motto. We had the rings made 28, 29 years ago. Megan has one too. And we had no idea where the love of God would compel us to go. We were just an ordinary family living in Cape Town, the tip of Africa, just doing the normal things, raising 4 children, being involved in the local community, the local school, the local church. Don was teaching at a local university, chemical engineering. I was teaching at a local school, Christian school, church history and history. And we just thought life would keep going on in the same place. But God called. And what do you do when God calls? One of the most famous Bible teachers of last century in the English-speaking world was Derek Prince, professor from Cambridge University. And I remember reading somewhere, or maybe it was even on a video, I heard him say, it's no good asking God what he wants you to do if you're just going to allow it to tickle your itchy ears. You have to be prepared to do what God calls you to do. Otherwise, don't ask him. I always remember that. And so, God called us from South Africa to Hawaii. That's halfway around the world from South Africa. 12 time zones if you go east, 12 time zones if you go west. We couldn't go any further unless we went to the moon. And so, 25 years ago, we packed up our family and we went to live in Hawaii, and we worked with YWAM, Youth with a Mission. You might be familiar with that. And then God called again. I think he'd been whispering in our ear about India, because we had gone to India in 1996 to perhaps teach in the oldest international school in Asia called Woodstock. It's up in the mountains, the Himalayan mountains, and it was started in the middle of the 1800s, so it's a very old international school. But we realized it wasn't the right place for us. But I think God placed India on our hearts at that stage. And so the whisper got louder and louder and louder. And eventually,
we needed to say, here I am, Lord, send us. And so we left Hawaii in 2007 and we went to India. And we've been based in India for 15 years. Don is now 76 and I'm 73. So there's no retirement. We will keep going for as long as we're healthy and well and fit and able. And God says, keep going. We will. So Don's going to tell you a little bit about what God has been doing with us since COVID hit. Because of course life changed, didn't it? We all know that. And so that's been an interesting couple of years for us.
So we went to India because somebody suggested we go to India. We first thought we'd go to Indonesia, but while we were visiting India for the first time, a pastor friend of ours said that another pastor had said, why don't you ask these people to come and build 10 houses in the villages? And I remember thinking 10 houses sounds sort of a good idea, and it took another year for us to actually get to the point where we packed our bags and we headed for India. And we were helped very much by a very good friend of ours who had given us a donation to cover some of the costs. And so we arrived in India, and when we were, we took a group of young students with us, our youngest son and his friends from Trinity Western University in Canada. And we started working. We thought we could build 3 houses in 3 weeks. And we started building on our first house, and it took 8 days for the materials to arrive because the materials were told it'll be there today, it'll be there tomorrow, it'll be there the next day, and eventually it arrived 8 days late. And after 3 weeks we had the walls of the first house up. But we would never have even got that far if the local pastor had not helped us. And the local pastor arrived and would take me on the back of his motorcycle into the village to get the materials, and he helped us in so many ways. The people in the villages don't speak English, and I don't speak Tamil, and he would translate, and then if he wasn't with me, I would pull out the cell phone and call him and explain to him that I wanted to tell this person that, and then I'd hand the cell phone to the person and they would sort it out. So he really helped me, and so we started getting our construction processes going. And after we'd been there 4 years, we were at one of his church services, and he said, he was telling us that he'd been working in the villages showing the Jesus film, and he saw these people struggling to live in these huts like you saw in the video. And this was 20 years prior to the time we were with us. He said, 20 years ago, I prayed, Lord, won't you send somebody to build houses for these people? And he said, and Brother Don has come to build the houses. So I heard about it 4.5 years after we'd started, and he had actually prayed for us to come 15 years before. So I was like, that's very interesting. You'd never told us that. So we ended up building, we had 3 teams of construction workers who were all part of the church, because our desire is not to build houses for people and not direct them towards eternal dwellings. So our ultimate focus is that the people we want to reach with the knowledge that they can live for eternity in a mansion that the Lord will give them. And so the way we've found is that the construction workers are all Christians. When a house starts off, all the people in the village want to know what's going on here. And because we give the house free of charge, they want to know why you're doing this. And we say to them, well, I'm very pleased you asked that question. And then the pastor can give them the message, and the construction workers can keep reinforcing that message while the construction. So our idea is to use the house as a platform for presenting the love of God and for presenting the gospel of Jesus to the people in the villages. And so now, 14 years later, we built 300 houses in India, mostly in the one region that is about 50 kilometers south of Chennai. And then when COVID hit, we had to leave India very quickly. We were told, look, if you don't leave in 3 days' time, you could be there for a long time. So we packed up and we headed back to Hawaii, and we were wondering, well, has this closed us down? Is this the end of our work in India? And we were reminded that when adversity comes, there is a great temptation to shrink the vision, but that it's probably a good idea to expand the vision. And Margie had the scripture from Isaiah. Do you want to read it?
It's from Isaiah 54 verse 2. Enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords. Strengthen your stakes. Isaiah 54 verse 2.
So initially all work stopped because of lockdowns and we ended up sending food to people that couldn't get food because they weren't allowed to leave their places of residence. And then we started to pray about how we should expand the vision, and we started to think of people we knew that were in India and in other countries in the rest of the world. And so we called we made 2 new partners, and the one person we called, we had met when we first got to India, and we knew he was building small churches in a neighboring state, and so we called him up and we said, would you be interested in building houses? His name's Ebenezer. When he was under 25, he was All-Asia chess champion, so he's a very brilliant man. And we discovered that he has connections all over India. He's very well connected with pastors in every state. And through his chess centers, he trains people in chess. He's got connections all over the place. So after we talked to him for a while, and he asked a lot of very pertinent questions, he said to me, he said, Don, I have been waiting for 14 years to start working with you. When I heard that this couple from South Africa had arrived in Chennai, he said, my heart leapt, and I said, Lord, I want to work with those people. And so he waited 14 years before we started working with him. Just the same as Jay Shivan had waited 15 years before we started with. So I was just amazed at the Lord's timing as opposed to ours. But Ebenezer has taken us to the point where in the first year of working with him, we built 20 houses. We built all over India. We built up in the Punjab. We built in a number of different states where he has connections with pastors. And he's arranged for the local pastors who are not that well educated, not that practical, to organize the construction of the houses in the villages. And one of the biggest challenges was to orchestrate the flow of funds to the village and to get the proper accounting of what has happened, how that money was spent. So that's been our biggest practical challenge. But in terms of the growth of the churches and in terms of reaching people around them, the pastors are all very excited about how the local people have been, their attention's been awakened to the fact that these Christians are giving somebody a house free of charge that they could never have dreamt of ever having. There was no hope about ever having a proper house other than a hut. And so that has had quite an impact now all over India. And then I don't know if Margie wants to tell the story about Moorfield Church. So
this is what happens when you've been married for 50 years. You know how to share. We have a church in England, in London, that supports the work of Hands on Houses. And they pray for us. They're very intentional about prayer. And we were on a Zoom call with them 18 months ago, and they said to us at the end of the update, what are your prayer requests? And we said a few things, and then we said, one of the things we really ask in God is we want to expand into other countries, not just India, but we don't know how to do that. And so they prayed a very simple prayer, asking God to show us. The next night, so that's 24 hours later, we were on another Zoom call with this partner Ebenezer in India. And after about an hour of catching up, hearing where he was building, what was going on, he said, of course Don, Pastor Don, he said, Pastor Don, have you ever thought of building in other parts of the world? 24 hours later, that simple prayer from the people in England was getting answered. Isn't God amazing? Tell them what the answer was.
So since that, we've built 2 houses in Sri Lanka, and we built 2 houses in Nepal, and he has ideas of maybe doing something in other countries where he has connections. So also in parallel with that, we connected with friends in Zambia, and they built a house there, and they're about to build another 2, which will grow to probably 5 over the next year. And then we reached out to a YWAM group in Mendoza in Argentina, and we suggested that they might want to build a house, and so it took a bit of a while, but we built a house for a widow, not a widow, a single mother with 2 daughters who's been living on a garbage dump. She's living in a plastic shelter, and she's been given a house with and we were given the choice. We were asked, do you want the house to have a bathroom or not? And Margie, there were 2 quotes, and Margie said, look, yeah, you can.
What do you do when there are 3 teenage daughters? You take the quote with the bathroom. It's a no-brainer. And so we said, we'll have the more expensive quote because it needs to be a blessing to this mother and her 3 daughters, and it needs to bring hope into their lives.
So I've just realized that the video you watched is available on our website, which is handsonhouses.com, HANDSONHOUSES.com. And I think we should put up the videos of the dedications in Zambia and also the dedication of the house in Mendoza, because they give a good example of the fact that we want the house to be a platform for spreading the gospel. So that's taken us into a whole new area where we've started working in many different countries. And we're still praying, Lord, where to next? Because we feel we need to keep expanding rather than thinking of shrinking it down. So that's sort of where we are at the moment. Was there something you wanted to share?
Well, let's share the videos and then we can share a little bit more.
Which one am I going to ask?
Yes, you tell me a bit about why you guys want to show that.
Okay. I think just to summarize what we've talked about so far, and this is something that I feel we really need to encourage you with, is that you're never too old and it's never too late. I don't know where that is in the Bible, but it's a good saying. Yes. And I jokingly say I feel 5 years younger now than I felt 5 years ago, and I can assure you that having to work in India has definitely forced me to stay younger than I am. It's just been an exhilarating scary in time of our lives, and where we've just had to make sure that we are prayed up and praised up, because I think the angels are working a little bit harder looking after us while we're in India than they would be in other parts of the world. So it's a faith-building experience. It's a time of knowing the presence of God in a more tangible way. And it's been a very exhilarating, rejuvenating experience for us. And we're not ready to stop yet. I joke with Molly, I say to her, and we're not in agreement on this, and I say to her, well, look, when we get to the stage where we are not really being fruitful anymore, I think we'll get a yacht and we'll go and fill it with Bibles and go and sail off the coast of Somalia and let the pirates take us out. You know, so she's not in agreement. But I really would just encourage you to not think of retiring. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So the other thing that we wanted to discuss with you was our one-day house. And what started us off initially was I was inspired by a man who lives in Indonesia. His name is Rus Alit. And when we came to the big island of Hawaii, the YWAM newspaper had an article on his ministry. And this was a man who had, I think, 8th grade education at the most. He's from a Christian family on the island of Bali. He lost half his family after an attempted coup, the communists tried to have a coup in Indonesia, which failed. But the locals went on the rampage and they wanted to kill everybody that was communist. And they decided to include the Christians in that as well. And so he lost half his family that way. He tried going through the villages, handing out tracts and trying the normal method of evangelism. The villagers told him, look, get out of the village, if you come back we'll kill you. So he was crying out to the Lord, and the Lord put the word biogas in his mind. And he didn't, I don't know if he knew what biogas was, but he just could not stop thinking about biogas. And then he researched it and he found that you could use animal manure and waste materials to create this gas that people could use to cook their foods, because the women would traditionally have to go and cut wood and bring it to the village, and so they're stripping the wood from the forests. And so he went to obviously one village first and said, look, why don't you, and there are lots of pigs that run around apparently, he said, why don't you put these pigs in a pen, and the pig waste we can turn into a gas that you can cook your food on. And the locals said, no, we don't want our food will taste like pig manure. And he said, no, it won't, try it. Anyway, he encouraged them to start making biogas in the villages. Then he developed a type of pump that would work without electricity. It was a ram pump that used a large volume of low pressure water to pump a small volume up. Because the villages are on top of the hill and the stream is down at the bottom, and the women would have to carry the water up. So he got involved with that. And then he started working on other very appropriate technologies. And the people were begging him to come to their villages. And I realized, if we've got something that tells people how much we care, they become interested in how much we know. Because the saying is, people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so, for me it was a way of, well, if we can use technology to help people in need, then that is a very useful door to open. And so that's what inspired us to get involved in these technological solutions. And one of the things that I started off building experimental houses that were new methods of construction. And I was building about 10 houses a year, because I kept on changing the design as I realized what wasn't working and what was working. And then our son Andrew, our eldest son Andrew, joined us. And he said to us, look, Dad, I think you should build with concrete blocks. we said, no, we don't build with concrete blocks, we build with these panels. And then he said, no, I think you really should focus on getting the production rate up. And then I did some calculations and found that my methods of construction were more expensive than the traditional concrete block structures. So we said, okay, we'll switch. And then he got me to agree to stop doing my professor type behavior and want to experiment the whole time. He said, just let's focus on production. Please stop your research and development. And so I agreed to that. And then our production rate jumped from 10 houses a year to 30 houses a year. So he took us into a new level. And so I said to him, well, okay, but I really want to carry on with this idea. And what really has been an encouragement to do this was we visited Malawi in the southern part of Africa to see if we could build houses for grandmother widows. These are older ladies that have now grandchildren they need to look after because their children have died from AIDS primarily. And we could have built a number of houses right away in an area called the Shire Valley. But I did not want to spend a night in that area. Mosquito infested, malaria, no hotels, no restaurants, none of the things we have in India. And so I started working on the idea of a house that could be built that the main structure could go up in a day. And that we could pack the materials onto the back of a truck, take it into the village, put it up, and then get out before sunset. And so that's what's called our one-day house. Can we put that video up, the one-day house? Is it possible? How are we doing time-wise? Yeah, okay. So our sort of vision is that we'd like to get to a point where we can build 100 of those houses in a year. It's starting to look as if it might even be possible. So prayers are that we would find a way of being able to do that in Africa to start off with. So that's our prayer. I don't know if there's anything you want to finish off with. There's another song I wanted to sing for you, so we'll end off with that. Yeah.
So just to encourage you, as Don said, you're never too old and it's never too late. There's another song that often goes through my mind, especially in the small hours of the night. And it also has similar words. It goes, "Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard your calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart." And I think that's where Don and I are at this season of our lives. God has taken us around the world many, many times. We never thought that was possible. And we have met wonderful, wonderful people in all walks of life, in many different countries. Our lives are rich with people, and we are so grateful to God that He's opened so many doors to us. So if you hear His call in the night or in the day, listen. You have no idea what He has up front for you. Take His hand and walk out in faith. He will never leave you. He will always walk with you.
Lord, we confess that we have wandered far from your purpose and plan, and willingly walk in the wrong direction. We disobeyed your command. Father, forgive us. Spirit, come lead us back to the way, back to the truth, back to the foot of the cross. Show us the ancient path. Lead us along eternal highways. We want to walk in the ways of Jesus. We want to enter your realm. Show us the ancient path. Lead us along eternal highways. We want to walk in the ways of Jesus. We want to enter your realm. Lord, it's your mercy and good intention that constantly calls us to you. Your infinite patience and kind correction, your covenant love coming through. You are our hope and our salvation. You promise joy, you give us grace and courage to carry the cross. Show us the ancient path. Lead us along eternal highways. We want to walk in the ways of Jesus. We want to enter your realm. Show us the ancient path. Lead us along eternal highways. We want to follow the footsteps of Jesus. We want to enter your realm.
it's alive.